Welcome to the Explainer. Here's a thought for you. What if the very thing that's threatening our planet, a melting Arctic, also somehow created a massive golden opportunity for global trade? It's a huge paradox, right? And today, we're diving right into this so-called Arctic shortcut. I mean, think about it. Our entire global economy basically runs on the ocean. A whopping 80% of everything you and I buy travels on these absolutely massive container ships. They're literally the lifeblood of global trade, pumping goods through just a few super critical arteries.
And the thing is, those arteries, they're surprisingly fragile. You've seen the news. Choke points like the Suez and Panama canals, they get clogged up. A stuck ship here, some regional conflict there, even drought caused by climate change. It can slow the whole system to a crawl. And we're talking billions of dollars in costs.
So, all of this brings us to a huge and kind of fascinating question. Could a warming planet actually, paradoxically, open up a brand new, way faster shipping route right across the top of the world? Okay, let's really get into this.
All right, so on paper, the whole idea of an Arctic shipping route looks, well, it looks incredible. It's super compelling. And it's all being driven by one simple and pretty alarming fact. The ice is disappearing fast. And that trend, it's undeniable. Every single year, that window where ships can actually get through gets a little wider. It's opening up these passages, like the Northern Sea Route. You'll hear it called the NSR, which runs right along Russia's coast for longer and longer periods.
And just look at this. The sheer difference in distance is wild. Let's take a key trip, say from Yokohama in Japan to Rotterdam in Europe. The Arctic route literally cuts that journey by more than half. 55% shorter. In the world of global logistics, that is an absolute game changer. Or at least it should be.
So you take that shorter distance, and what does it mean? It means huge savings. We're talking potentially over $180,000 just on fuel for one single trip. Less time at sea, lower costs, maybe even lower emissions per trip. You can see why the economic pull here is so powerful.
Okay, so with savings like that, you'd think there would be a traffic jam, right? A line of ships stretching for miles, all waiting to use this amazing new shortcut. But the reality on the water, well, it tells a very, very different story. All right, so let's dig into the hard numbers and see what's really going on. Hype versus reality.
Okay, now at first glance, the growth along Russia's Northern Sea Route, it looks explosive. Cargo volume has shot up nearly 10 times in just over a decade. It's hitting new records year after year. But, and this is a huge but, context is everything. So when you actually compare the transit cargo on the NSR, and that's the key part, the ships going all the way through from, say, Asia to Europe, when you compare that to the sheer volume pouring through the Suez Canal, the scale is just staggering. The Arctic traffic? It's barely even a blip on the radar of global trade. So, here's the crucial takeaway. We are not in any way talking about a serious competitor to the Suez Canal right now. We're talking about something that's, well, it's basically a rounding error in the grand scheme of things. 0.2%. That's it. And this quote just nails it, doesn't it? It perfectly captures that huge gap between the hype and the reality. The Arctic is not a superhighway. It's a seasonal back road. It's growing, for sure, but it's still incredibly niche. So, okay, why? Why the massive gap? Well, the reasons go way beyond just, there's still ice floating around. There are some huge operational barriers and some really profound consequences that people don't often talk about. The list of challenges is just long. First off, the navigation season is super short and totally unpredictable. Your ships have to be specially reinforced, these ice-class ships, and that's expensive. Then there's the fact that there are basically no major ports or logistics hubs up there. And on top of all that, you usually have to pay for a Russian icebreaker to escort you because, the whole route is controlled by Russia. For a lot of shipping companies, that is a massive geopolitical risk they're just not willing to take.
And get this. If you look over at the other route, the Northwest Passage through the Canadian Arctic, the picture is even more surprising. The single biggest user group is private yachts, 41%. You add in cruise ships, and suddenly you realize that tourists and adventurers are outnumbering the big commercial cargo ships. And believe me, that brings a whole different set of risks. Because here's the bottom line, any increase in traffic, doesn't matter if it's a supertanker or a super yacht, carries an absolutely immense environmental risk. We're talking about one of the most pristine and fragile ecosystems left on the entire planet.
One of the biggest dangers is something called black carbon. It's basically soot from the ship's exhaust. And the best way to think about it is it's like putting a black t-shirt on the ice on a sunny day. Instead of reflecting the sunlight, it absorbs it. That makes the ice melt faster. And this creates a really dangerous feedback loop. More ships mean more black carbon, which means more melting, which then opens the route for even more ships. And we have to be clear, this isn't just some abstract environmental issue. It is a profoundly human one. All that underwater noise from the ships, it can totally mess up the migration and hunting patterns of whales, seals, and other marine life. And that directly threatens the food security and the ancient cultures of the indigenous communities who have lived there and relied on that very ecosystem for thousands of years. Okay, so if it's not going to be the next Suez Canal, what is the actual future for these Arctic routes? Well, the most likely answer is something a lot more nuanced, something more specialized. Yeah, instead of a universal superhighway for everyone, think of it more like an important regional corridor. It's like a strategic bypass, mainly for specific cargo, Russian natural gas, minerals coming out of the Arctic. And it could be a really valuable relief valve for those times when the other major global routes get blocked up. And this evolution is probably going to happen in stages. So in the short term, let's say by the 2030s, it's still an experimental corridor for very specific cargo. Then, maybe by mid-century, it becomes what you could call a niche superhighway, the go-to summer choice for certain industries. But that final step, a year-round, ice-free route by 2100, that comes with a really dark catch. That future is only possible in a world that has been completely ravaged by climate change. And that right there, that brings us back to the central paradox of this whole thing. The only way we get that superhighway is in a future we should be terrified of wanting. A fully open, year-round Arctic route isn't a sign of progress. It's a symptom of a planetary fever that has gotten way out of control. So in the end, the real question isn't if ships are going to go north. They are. The question is how we decide to manage that traffic. How do we balance that shiny lure of economic opportunity against irreversible damage to the ecosystem? And who ultimately pays the price when the very ice we all depend on becomes just another ocean for us to sail on?